All right. I think that's, yeah. All right. Good. All right. So let's begin. The last point that we mentioned last week, I had mentioned that Rav Moshe Feinstein, amongst other 20th century poskim, were not enamored with the idea of a machira, of a sale, of a business every Erev Shabbos, not because technically it's not okay. Technically, it sounds like it would be okay according to Rav Moshe Feinstein, but he was not enamored with it because of the problems of Rama. He was noting that people were not necessarily conducting that sale in a way that was honest. It was more fiction towards getting around the halachic problem, but there's still, if essentially you're going to still collect the money, you're just going to figure out a roundabout way to collect the money. It's not really a proper way to do it. So because of that reason, he didn't feel like it was a good idea. And also, one of the other reasons that he mentioned was that sometimes people didn't do a sale didn't set up the sale in a proper way, where maybe they still did have ownership over the business, at least in part. And we'll talk about when you have a partnership that's Reish Mem Hey. But so he didn't think this was the best arrangement to make. That was really building off the last comment of the Mishnah Brura. That he said it's mutter heicha shemocho lo legamre b'chol erev Shabbos, that if you sold the business every Shabbos, that would be okay. Again, Rav Moshe Feinstein at the end of the day didn't think that was the best way forward. Okay, now we're up to Sif Beis, which let me show you with an arrow right over here, and I'll put it over here. Okay, so Sif Beis, the Shulchan Aruch writes, "Afilu merchat zotanur im hiskiram shana achar shana v'nisparsem hadavar al yedei kach shein darko liskor poli v'lahaskiram." So he says, even if you are dealing with a business that's a bathhouse or a public oven, which we had said previously is problematic to have any kind of arrangement with a non-Jew working that on Shabbos, even if I rented out the business. So I'm actually not making any of the profits because of the issue of Maris Ayin, because it's abnormal for a person to have an arrangement in such a way. It's just not normal in that particular area. The normal arrangement for owning a bathhouse or a public oven is that maybe you have a non-Jew working for you and collecting fees as people come into the bathhouse or come to use the public oven. So, but if I have an arrangement, even in these kinds of places, that I rent out the business year after year, it's not like I really run this place. Year after year, I'm always renting it out, maybe to the same person, maybe to different people, but I don't really run the business. I may own it, but I don't really run it from day to day. I don't make the profits on any given day. I get a fixed fee that the non-Jew pays me to be able to use that business. So if that's the case, where year after year it's always rented out, and v'nisparsem hadavar al yedei kach, and this is how it is publicized. I mean, I let everybody know in the community that I put it out there. I own it, but I always rent it out year after year, and people know this fact. Shein darko liskor poli v'laskir. People know that when you see a non-Jew working in this business, it's not because I hired them to work for me. It's because I rented out the business to them. That's the difference between liskor polim, that's just hiring workers, and I pay them a salary, but I make all the profits on any given day, versus lahaskiram, that's to rent it out, meaning they make the profits on any given day. They pay me a fixed fee use it, or to basically have access to that business and to run the business. V'chein im minhag rov anshe oso hamokom lahaskiram olitnam ba'arisus. And furthermore, if the custom, if the normal activity of a particular area is that such a business, whether it's in this case a bathhouse or any other business, the normal method of arranging other workers at the place are because I rent it out, that's a normal action, or there's a sharecropper arrangement, litnam ba'arisus, then mutter lahaskirim la'eno Yehudi o litnam lo la'arisus, then it is permissible to rent it out to a non-Jew with a full understanding that they're going to utilize that business on Shabbos. Or I could also give it to them, or also I could arrange a sharecropper situation where I actually own the business and I will get some of the profits from what's done on Shabbos. And people will see that so-and-so is working on Shabbos, but they know it's an arisus situation, and therefore the non-Jew is really working on their own behalf. If you take away the profits, that's arisus is an example we talked about in previous weeks. They take a third, a quarter, whatever the agreement is, they take a certain amount of the actual profits that come in on that day. So if there's $1,000 made, they make $250. If there's only $100 made, they make $25. So they have incentive to work harder, whatever the business, however the arrangement is, because they get more. The problem is that when you don't have the non-Jew making some of the profits, the Aruch HaShulchan states this very clearly. I read through the Aruch HaShulchan again yesterday to really prepare myself. He makes it very clear that that's called shlichus, and that the non-Jew is working. Yeah, he has a salary, so why isn't that adaited enough of it? The reason is because if he's making nothing when it comes to the actual profits of that day, then with regards to the work that he does that day, he's just my shaliach. We view him as the shaliach of the Jew, and shaliach shel adam kamoto. The shliach of a person is like stand-in for that person themselves, and that's why it's like the Jew is working on Shabbos. But if once you enter a situation into a situation where the non-Jew is getting some of the profits, in a schir situation, it's all the profits. But even in arisus, it's at least a percentage of the profits from that day. Then you can say that the non-Jew is not completely a shaliach of the Jew because he's also working for his own self-interests. So that's why it's problematic if there's no share in the profits between the Jew and the non-Jewish in the situation of arisus would be the sharecropper worker. Now, so these are two conditions laid out here. Number one is pirsum, publicity. Second is if it's normal in that situation. The Aruch HaShulchan makes it abundantly clear you can have one of these situations. You don't need to have both in order for it to work. So you can have a place which normally doesn't have a particular arrangement, but I publicize year after year that I always do X with my business, and that works to quell the problem of marasayin, right? That was all a problem in the first place. Or if I have the minhag hamakom being that such an arrangement is normal, even if I don't publicize it, that's also fine because this will deal with the just mere minhag factor will deal with the marasayin issue. So it's either or. Okay, let's take a look quickly at Yud Aleph. One comment from the Mishnah Berurah that he makes on the Shulchan Aruch's comments before we go to the Ramah. Down here. So in Yud Aleph, he writes, Mutar v'chulei v'litnam v'chulei. This is basically talking about the whole statement that we just read. So the two leka chashada, as I explained, there is no more chashad. There's no more suspicion that, why is there smoke billowing out of the merchatz out of the bathhouse on Shabbos, it must be that Yankel is working the business on Shabbos, even if it's through a non-Jew. All right, that Mechal Shabbos Yankel. No one's gonna suspect that anymore, because they understand, either because of publicity or because they understand what's normal in their location, that there's no reason to suspect that the Jew is violating Shabbos here. And even if it's not the normal situation in that particular place, or for that particular person, if it's normal, they usually only have a haschirus situation. I mean, that's the only arrangement that's normal in that particular place. So it's usually rented out. But what happens if I have a sharecropper? So is that a problem? The answer is no. It's fine, because mikol makom muter gam ba'arisus. The yitlu to his skirulo. People will think he rented out the business, even though it's a sharecropper arrangement. They're both technically mutter, and again, there is no problem of people having any suspicions. And even if they're thinking, oh, it's schirus, and really it's arisus. Okay, who cares? As long as they don't think that Shabbos is being violated. As long and the actual arrangement is perfectly fine, and that the non-Jew is daited the nafshe of it, is really working for his or her own self-interests, so that's okay. All right.
So in a business where everyone knows it's customary to tip, and to tip well, even if you take all the profits from that business 7 days a week, how would that play out? Everyone knows that the person is working for the tips.
Yeah, I personally think, and I should probably ask a posek what would they say about this if it was actually asked as a real shaila for a business. But my gut instinct is to say the answer is that's a daita de nafshe avid. I think it's a daita de nafshe avid, because the more they work, the more work they do, so I'll say this. Part of me thinks yes, partly because they do have their own incentive to work extra here. Because the more they work, the harder they work, the better the quality of the job. Maybe the more they make on tips, and so that's they're working sort of for their own self-interest, and they are taking some of the profits, because they're getting some of the money that came into the business. It just that went straight and directly to them, and that's part of why maybe it's a problem. By the way, because there was never really a share in the profit. Meaning, you might be able to bifurcate here and say that there are two payments happening when it comes to a tip. There's the business, and the worker ran the business, and that what made X amount of money because of the prices that you can see on the wall behind me for all the services. And then there's the second part where it's just like, here, this is a separate payment to the person. I wonder if a posek would you view that as a separate, I don't want to say business, but a separate situation that is aside from, meaning when we say that the sharecropper gets a percentage of the, of everything that came in that day, that means that literally of the things that came in, or in the field arrangement, it's like, okay, I'm going to take some of this stuff that literally I just picked from the field, and I'm taking with me to go. Whereas you could say that, no, all the money came in, and then a separate, fund came in towards this person. So I don't know. I actually, I'm going to make a note here to myself just to ask Rabbi Weeder when I speak to him sometimes.
I mean, technically, you don't have to tip. It's just that everyone tips. It's known.
Right.
If you're a real CAD, you give the guy a tip.
Right. Exactly. Right. So let's say you have a parking garage, right? Yeah. So that's where my head is in the city all the time. I'm always finding parking. So you're going into a garage. Right, of the other money, the worker, the fellow parking the cars doesn't make any of that money that you pay, whatever the fee is for using the parking lot for X amount of hours. But it's very common for someone to give a little tip to the guy. So the question is, do we view that as a separate situation? I'm curious now. I think it has practical halachic ramifications. I'm going to ask. I could see going both ways on this one. So
you put it in a restaurant where you have tipping, and it's very common, and it's acknowledged to be an important stream of compensation. So important that restaurants experiment with a tip or including it in the main bill.
Right.
Clearly, that's a stream of compensation.
Right. So that's an interesting. You're pointing out that it comes in some ways in a restaurant. There's no getting around the tipping. Right.
I mean, they pay you minimum wage because you're going to get a tip.
That's
probably the major part of what you're going to get.
Right. Yeah, that's a very different. Right. So the question is there in that business, though, as a separate problem, is that in the kitchen, if I own the business and then there are people cooking on my behalf, that's a different problem. But your point is, well, I guess you could say the same thing about someone who harvests. Right. Let me ask about this. I think it's an interesting question for a posik to weigh in on a practical level.
But in a parking garage situation, the fellow who parks your car and brings it back to you, I mean, there's no incentive to him. I mean, maybe he'll get a tip, but there's no better service or worse service unless he gives you some special arrangement for some special tip.
Right. That's correct. Yeah. So he has to do. It's not like he can really choose how many bushels to pull in today, or whatever. He has to do his job with the cars because
he could work quickly, or he could sit on his hands for 20 minutes and let everybody wait.
Right.
So the faster he works.
Right, people will be more impressed with him and give him a bigger tip or something like that. Yeah, I hear you. That's an interesting question. I will find out. And we've all been in a parking garage with one of those people. Sometimes he takes his too sweet. Is taking his sweet time, and others who are working to quickly get people in and out. Yeah.
And you'll let us know, right?
Yes, I wrote it down here. I'm gonna get back on this one. This is what's fun about Hilchot Shabbat is that now we get to start to ask some real practical questions. It's a little bit different than when we were learning Hilchos Mincha or whatever, which is fine. It's good to learn it, but here now you start to get them into some fun gray areas. Okay, great. Now let's take a look at the Ramah. So we're up here. You look right there. Okay, here we go. Va'afilu b'makom ha'asur im ein hamerchatz o hatanur shel Yisrael rak sachar me'ena Yehudi. So let's say even in a place where it is prohibited, let's say that's, a normal arrangement in a particular area is it's always you just hire workers. So nobody's thinking that it's rented out the business. If you have a merchatz or a tanur, a bathhouse or an oven that belongs to a Jew, but they rent it out to a non-Jew, the Jew rents it out from the non-Jew. So the non-Jew owns the business. The Jew then rents the business from the non-Jew, and he turns around, and he finds his other non-Jewish friend, and he says, here, I want to sublease it's a rental, another rental on his rental. Okay, so you have non-Jew owns it, Jew rents it out to a non-Jew. So what's the situation here? Are they going? Is there Marasayan? I don't own the business actually. So the Ramah says that this is permissible. Such an arrangement will be permissible. Which, by the way, would mean that I could maximize some profits here because even though I can't work the business on Shabbos, my ability to rent it out, including on Shabbos, will give me some money that I wouldn't have otherwise perhaps been able to get. But this is permissible. De'ein shem ha'Yisrael nikra alav. People are not going to associate the business with the Jew. I'm just the guy who came in the middle and turned around and immediately gave it to somebody else. So I'm making money off of this arrangement, but nobody actually knows that. Maybe my close friends, but they'll know. Right? V'chein im yesh merchatz. Sorry. So let's read the Mishnah Berurah on that case, and then there's a second case that's relevant here. Take a look at Yud Beis, Yud Gimel, Yud Daled. Rak Sechoram. Beis Yosef Hevi b'shem Tshuvas HaGeonim. Dehu Hadinim Kona Me'eno Yehudi V'teicha Kodem Sheyosha B'Hiskira. This halacha emerges from the Tshuvas HaGeonim, the responsa literature that we find from the Geonim. The Geonim are 8th, 9th century, and it's found in there that if, let's say, a Jew bought the business, not just rented it, but bought it from a non-Jew, so now the Jew owns it, but he immediately Teichef kodem b'sheyoshav, before he really kind of sits down there and takes root in that place, it's just a business arrangement. He buys it in order to turn around and immediately rent it out to somebody. Delo nikra shmolav, and that's permissible because nobody will ever know. It still says ABC Car Wash, and they don't know that ABC Car Wash is owned by a Jew. For all they know, they think it's still owned by a non-Jew beforehand. And you can rely upon this to have such an arrangement. That's what the Magen Avram believes. Yud Gimel, Me'eno Yehudi, De'im Hayashal Yisrael Nira de Osor. Da'al Yidei Zeh Yachshedu Oso Yisrael Bal HaMerchat She'eno Yehudi Hu Schir Yomo. Look, if it was just the situation as we talked about where the Jew owns the business, of course it would appear that this should be prohibited, because people will think that the non-Jew who is working there on Shabbos is just a schir yom. He's just a daily worker every day, gets paid, a certain amount by the owner, but takes nothing of the profits. Like, he doesn't get percentage of the business. So therefore, he's just a shaliach of the Jew. That's why it would be problematic. But if people think that the non-Jew owns it, or that it is actually owned by the non-Jew, then you could probably get around this problem. Yud Daled Chazar v'Hiskiram. So he says, Yesh Omrim de Beschirus Nami Eino Motor Ela Kishelo Yoshav Baha Yisrael. Even by schirus, it's only permissible as long as the Jew really hasn't taken root in that business. First he rented it out from a non-Jew, and then for a year he ran the business. So everyone said, "Oh, hey, Mr. Cohen, how you doing?" Every time they come in, and now they're walking to shul on Shabbos one day, and suddenly Mr. Cohen's bathhouse that he rents, people know that, but he rented out this bathhouse. People say, "Oh, Mr. Cohen, look at him. He hired his non-Jewish worker to work the business on Shabbos. What a machal Shabbos Mr. Cohen is." And so that's the problem. Beis Yosef, Bekonas, Beis Yosef wrote in a situation, it's almost like he bought it, and now people know it's his, even though he didn't actually buy it in this situation. But there are other Achronim who believe, the Elia Rabbah among them, who says the Bischaro Me'eno Yehudi, in a situation where the Jew rents it from a non-Jew, after Yosha Baha Yisrael, even though then he does take root there and he runs the business for some time, so Muter Lahaskir Le'eno Yehudi, it's okay if he then turns around, rents it out to a non-Jew, and then the business will be open on Shabbos. The low nikra shmo'alav, because they said that people will apparently not attribute this to his name because the business is not attributed to Mr. Cohen. It's attributed to the non-Jew he rented it from. Okay, you can it's a machloket here. A lot of this has honestly changed. Some of the biurim that I have here in this newer edition of the Mishnah Berurah that I have in front of me with the 20th century poskim. Obviously, nowadays, I would say it's even changed with the internet. You can go online. You can read about the business, who owns the business. So a lot of these things have changed. Bain lekula, bain lechumra, meaning that I can go on somebody's website and I can see that if, let's say, there's an arrangement, so they'll write about the arrangement there on the internet. So it's clear as daylight, and I put a $2 on my front door. If everyone knows the arrangement, I advertise it, and So that's sorry, there's a lot of scratching here on the line. A second. Yeah, there's definitely a change with all the ability to publicize. They're talking here like the 20th Century Post about putting things in the newspaper, taking out an advertisement in the newspaper, about your business. Now with the internet, I would say this is it's easier to get information out in a very quick fashion. And again, maybe that means that people will assume it's will now know it actually is your business that you're renting out. They're not going to attribute it to the non-Jew who owns the business because bein lakula, bein lachumra, advertising and social media and media just in general has changed probably how we view this halacha. Okay, let's go back to the Ramah here. One more case. I think it's just one more case. Okay. V'chein im yesh merchatz bebeis dira. Let's say there's a bathhouse in a particular base dira. I'm going to say here this is like an apartment building. Okay? So you have many people who are a part of this living space. Ve'ein rochatzim b'merchatz rak oson shebebeisa. And the only people that use it are the Jews and the non-Jews in this particular complex. Okay? Those are the only people that use this business. Ve'heim yodim Shisacharo, turn the page, Eino Yehudi, and they know that a non-Jew has rented out the business on Shabbos. So the people in the building know what's going on with the bathhouse that's in their building. And they're the only ones that use it. So it's like advertising on a small level because everybody knows. So then that's permissible. Shari, that is permissible. And again, the idea being here is that everybody essentially knows what is happening. Let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah on this. We'll probably have to end with this Mishnah Berurah, which means we'll have one last thing to finish up last week, which is probably the most interesting of all the issues, is what happens if in an inappropriate arrangement the business is conducted. Is the Jew allowed to keep the profits or no? And you see, by the way, a preview that there are two opinions here on this one, and we'll explore each opinion. And ultimately, the Aruch HaShulchan is going to say that they're not really disagreeing with each other. They're just in different situations. So we'll talk about that next time. Let's just finish up this comment of the Mishnah Berurah that relates to the Beis Dira situation, this apartment complex. So Tezvav, Beis Dira, the Hainu Shamerchatz Eino B'Reshus HaRabim. We're not talking about a bathhouse that's sort of in public. Even if in that situation, then this is not public, much more private situation. The Jew never knows it's a Jewish business. He's been running it for a long time. Now he wants to rent it out, and now it'll be open on Shabbos. Everyone will say it's fine. Rak b'chatzero echad mehabeis dira shelo, but it's just in one courtyard, of a complex. And the only people who even use it during the week are the people who live in that complex. Other people who are going to walk by and they'll see smoke billowing out of the place aren't going to even know who lives in this place or that there's a bathhouse there. The Osan Shebabesel Hayodim Mizeh, and those who live there know the whole situation. Gamhem Yodim Sheiskir Le'enei, they presumably know who that the non-Jew rented out the business because it's a small group of people, and it's easy to get the word out to that group, and they know what's going on in their complex. About Kisharochatzim Gam Anoshim Acherim, but other people use that a bathhouse to take to bathe. Hello, Nisparsim Sheyesh Merchatz. Now everybody knows in 145 Waverly Road complex that there is a bathhouse there, and it's owned by a Jew. Also, Merchatz Nikrek Bikvar Al Shem Yisrael, and that's what people attribute it to the Jew. When they're walking the shul and they pass by, even though it's behind a little wall, whatever, they see the smoke billowing out. They see the smoke coming out on Shabbos. They're going to say that the non-Jew who's working that business is lighting that fire on behalf of the Jew. This is only a situation we mutter if it's that particular courtyard, right? But if it's standing in the Rishus Harabim, everyone can see it. It's basically a public business that you can walk by. Everybody knows what's going on. But if it's a private club bathhouse, so everyone in the private club knows the arrangement. But everybody knows Cohen owns the business as they're going to shul, even though I can't use it because I'm not in the club. It's still a problem because they know it's a bathhouse that's owned by a Jew. Mikol makom asur hakol yodim sheyesh sham merchatz ve'ein hakol yodim shehiskiro le'eno Yehudi. Everyone knows it's a Jewish-owned business, but not everybody knows that the arrangement that was made to rent it out to a non-Jew. Kein kasu harbe achronim. This is what many of the achronim say. V'yesh mekilin od, and there are those who are a little more mekil, more lenient. The im hu omed b'rshus acher b'fnei atzmo shelo b'chatzeru. If they, let's say, the business is standing in someone else's chatzer, in a different chatzer, in a different courtyard, az afilu rochatzim bo anashim acherim afilu hachi shari dimistama ein hakol yodom shu shelo. It's in a private space. It's only used by a subset of people. Some say that's okay as well because not the whole public is aware of this situation, and the people who go to abuse the business, they know what's going on. Rak osan hashchenim shel hamerchatz, the people who are living there know the situation. Mistama nisvala gahem gam as shiskir le'eno Yehudi. And presumably they know that the non-Jew rented out this business because it's just a private situation that's been arranged. Okay, I'm going to stop here because I see that the